If you love Saving Private Ryan, Spielberg says these 8 movies are required viewing. He's actually got a list of war movies he thinks every filmmaker should watch, and there's a few on there you've probably never even heard of. So let's dive right into Spielberg's own favorite war films. Spielberg grew up watching classic war movies on TV, and this was one of the first to really leave a mark. Battleground is a realistic, gritty look at World War II, specifically the Battle of the Bulge. And this was the first big Hollywood combat movie after the war ended, kind of revived the whole genre. They went all out making this. Real veterans were used to train the cast. You had actors like James Arness, who actually fought in World War II. The writer, Robert Pirosh, he was there too. He fought in the Battle of the Bulge himself. Spielberg says movies like Battleground inspired him, not necessarily how they looked or the camera style, but the feeling of camaraderie, of soldiers in tough situations pulling together. That's something you definitely see show up in his own movies. Samuel Fuller made this one, and this was the first American movie ever about the Korean War. Fuller himself was a World War II veteran. He knew what real combat felt like, and he made sure it showed on screen. This was ultra low budget, just $100,000. They shot the entire thing in 10 days, 6 months after the war started. No money for fancy stuff. The enemy tank in this one is literally plywood. And Fuller didn't pull any punches. You've got scenes dealing with racism, war crimes, and even mentions of Japanese-American internment camps during World War II, at the height of McCarthyism, when people were freaking out about anything controversial. Fuller got investigated by the FBI for this. He didn't care. He wouldn't even cast John Wayne, who the studio wanted. He picked Gene Evans, an actual veteran who Fuller felt was authentic. Spielberg loves Fuller's war movies, and so does Martin Scorsese. He said Fuller's films were some of the bravest, least sentimental war movies ever made. Spielberg also puts this one on his must-watch list. Set during World War II, it's about a tiny squad of American soldiers stuck defending a position against a huge German force. And the cast alone makes it worth seeing. Steve McQueen is the lead, right at the start of becoming a huge star. But McQueen hated making this movie, didn't like the script, argued constantly with the director Don Siegel, and refused to play some noble patriotic hero. The set was just a few fake trenches at Paramount's backlot, because they had almost no money, and all the explosions and effects had to be practical, triggered by crew members off-screen. The script was originally darker, more cynical, but the studio made them soften it up, add humor. McQueen hated that too, but Siegel made it work. It bombed when it came out, but now it's definitely a cult favorite. This is one Spielberg always brings up, Stanley Kubrick's Paths of Glory. Set during World War I, it's about French soldiers sent on an impossible attack mission. When the mission fails, as it was obviously going to, the generals blame the soldiers, even court-martial some of them just to make a point. Kubrick got the rights to a book based on a true military scandal, but nobody wanted to make this movie until Kirk Douglas got involved. Douglas basically made it happen. The budget was tiny, less than $1 million, and Douglas used his star power to push it through, and he really believed in it too. Said there's a picture that will always be good years from now. I don't have to wait 50 years to know that. I know it now. Spielberg always admired Kubrick's camera work in this, especially how carefully Kubrick used close-ups. And when Kubrick passed away, Spielberg showed the final scene of Paths of Glory to a bunch of people at his house. The scene with exhausted soldiers listening to a German girl singing. Spielberg said everyone watching was in tears, including him, because that's who Kubrick really was as a filmmaker. Among his favorite war films, Spielberg's even mentioned a newer one, The Zone of Interest from 2023. It's directed by Jonathan Glazer, and Spielberg said it's the best Holocaust movie he's seen since his own Schindler's List, which, coming from him, means a lot. He said it's doing important work, reminding people how ordinary evil looks, feels, and acts. That's why it hit him so hard. It's about the everyday life of German Auschwitz commandant and his wife, who live with their family in a home in the Zone of Interest next to the German concentration camp. Based on a novel, it's pretty brutal but incredibly powerful. It ended up winning big at Cannes, got nominated for Oscars, won several BAFTAs. Spielberg first saw this movie at about 16, and by then, he'd been making these little home movies for years already. But watching Lawrence of Arabia in a fancy theater in 70mm stereophonic sound actually almost made him quit. Spielberg literally said he walked out of the theater thinking, maybe directing isn't for me, because the movie was just too good. He figured there was no way he'd ever be able to match something like that. And it was massive indeed. They spent 2 years filming in Jordan, Morocco, Spain, all over the place, and blew way past budget almost immediately. Final price tag was $15 million, huge for back then. But it paid off, because the movie made around $70 million worldwide and won 7 Oscars, including Best Picture and Best Director. Spielberg talks about how this was the first movie that really made him realize films didn't have to just be about plots. They could be about deeper character stuff, personal themes. And that's what he saw in Lawrence, a movie about a guy asking, "Who am I?" But here's the twist. The movie that almost made Spielberg quit ended up making him more determined than ever, that bar being set so high, he spent the rest of his life aiming right for it. Spielberg actually watches this movie every single year, makes his friends sit down and watch it with him, and once you see it, you get why. The Best Years of Our Lives is about 3 American soldiers coming back home after World War II, and they're not returning to heroes' welcomes or ticker-tape parades. It's about coming back and realizing life at home is completely different now. One guy's marriage is falling apart, another guy can't find a decent job. And then there's Homer, who lost both hands in the war. William Wyler, the director, actually fought in the war himself, flew bombing missions, came back half-deaf. And when he returned, he wanted to show people something Hollywood wasn't really talking about, how hard it was for veterans to adjust. Martin Scorsese once said that The Best Years of Our Lives is one of the great works of American cinema, and people loved it. Over 55 million Americans watched this movie in theaters, back when the entire population was like 140 million. It made almost $24 million, which was huge at the time, won 7 Oscars, including Best Picture, even beat It's a Wonderful Life at the Oscars and at the box office. Tom Hanks says it's the greatest film ever made about the war and the generation who fought it. Coppola says it's one of the 10 best films ever. Spielberg actually put it on his essential movies list for young filmmakers. It's that good. Still hits hard today, and it probably always will. Spielberg straight up calls this his favorite war movie of all time. Where Eagles Dare came out in the 60s, back when Hollywood was obsessed with this whole men on a mission thing. Movies like The Dirty Dozen, The Guns of Navarone, The Magnificent Seven, but this one's special. You've got Clint Eastwood and Richard Burton as commandos sneaking into this Nazi mountain fortress to rescue a captured American general, but nothing goes as planned, because nobody's telling the truth. Double cross after double cross, twist after twist. Half the characters end up dead. They marketed it like a war movie, but honestly, it feels way more like a paranoid spy thriller, just with soldiers and explosions, and nobody expected much from it. Until it pulled in $21 million at the box office, became one of MGM's biggest hits that year, and ended up a cult classic almost right away. Also pretty much Richard Burton's last real box office success in the US. But mostly it's just great entertainment, and Spielberg absolutely loves it.